and welcome to episode 4 of Punishing Brutality, the transatlantic extreme metal podcast. I'm Matt in Philly, and I'm joined as ever by Chris in London. What's up, Chris?
How you doing, Matthew? You all right?
Very well, sir, very well.
I keep trying to think of something really witty to say, and I had thought of something earlier today, and it's just completely escaped my mind, so it's just going to have to be a generic, hi, how you doing sort of thing at the moment. So
That's just fine. We're not known
please
for
continue.
our wits.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got an absolutely packed episode, as we do every time. I think this one's more packed than anything that we've tried to do before. It's kind of a bit ridiculous, really, but there's just been so much going on. So we'll try and cover a whole lot of different stuff. We've got live stuff. We've got some new releases. We're going to kind of touch on a few new releases, but there's been so many of them, unfortunately, that we can't really kind of play music from them all because the podcast will just go on for like 5 hours. So we'll touch on those. We're going to do a couple of actual reviews. We're going to do some live show reviews. We're going to do a little excursion into the UK underground, which is going to be kind of interesting. And then we're going to finish off with another classic album retrospective.
Yeah, because we're old, and that's basically, we're just like stuck in the early 90s, man.
I feel really old.
No advancement in music since the early 90s, and that's where I'm quite happy to reside, so that's what we're going back to.
Yeah, pretty much. We've got
so much shit to get through today, it's actually ridiculous, isn't it? So we'll probably have to try and keep it as brief as we can in places. But what's going on first?
All right, so let me just touch on a few things that came out in October. Like, October was crazy. I'm going to single out the 26th of October in particular, which was absolutely ridiculous. So very quickly, we had a new record from Glacial Tomb on Gilead Media. That's really heavy, kind of sledgy HM2 death metal from Ben Hutchison of Chemis. So more great extreme metal coming out of Denver. If you like Chemis, but maybe you don't like the kind of melodic vocals, the lack of deathy vocals, you want no clean singing, then Glacial Tomb. I think this is a really good album. It's creative and kind of nostalgic without being too derivative. So I think that's really cool. What else we got? Cryptopsy, the Book of Suffering. This is just a 5-track Book of Suffering Tone 2, I should say. So that's like a 5-track brutal technical death metal from the legends from Montreal. I mean, that's just amazing. Go and check that out. It's really fucking good. Hissing, Permanent Destitution, dissonant, just incredibly hateful and misanthropic kind of ambient death metal from Seattle. If you guys liked that Infernal Coil record that we reviewed recently, you will like this. It's pretty bitter. What else? And then a couple of big ones. We talked previously about Hate Eternal Upon Desolate Sands. That came out. Oh man, it's so good. It is so good.
Pretty riotous. I'd had to go to a shopping centre of all places to try and get my phone fixed, and I was listening to that, and I just got in there, and it was just a seething mass of people, and it just was really fitting. It reflected the rage that I was feeling of having to be in a shopping centre on a Saturday, man. Hungover as well. I was just infuriated. So Hate Eternal, man. Really good.
It is really good. Like I was expecting it to be good. It's better than I thought it was going to be.
Where'd you rank it? Where'd you rank it in the album? I'm a Hate Eternal newbie, to be honest with you. So where would you put it in their catalogue?
Well, I mean, it's the best thing I've heard from them, for 10 years. I would say, it's really good. Wow. I don't want to kind of rank their albums. I'm not familiar with all of them, but it's fantastic. I mean, I just think it's one of the most solid and accomplished death metal releases of the year. It's just fantastic, and it could be kind of knocking on the door of the maybe not the top 10 for the year, but certain definitely
honorary mentions,
top 20. Yeah, it's really really good. Check that out. The title track in particular, Upon Desolate Sands, is just pulverizing. Really good.
Cool.
Oh, and then the Arrow of Satan is Drawn by Bloodbath. I mean, this band, they just don't make bad records. But I think I like this one more than the previous one, Grand Morbid Funeral. It's I don't know if it's certainly not my favorite Bloodbath record, but I really do like this. And I was a little kind of like, the single Chainsaw Lullaby was kind of a bit silly in the Eaton kind of mold. But
Eaton's amazing.
Eaton is it's pure classic. It's pure classic. So all of that came out on 10/26, just in one day. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different killer records. Really, go and check those out. All of those are really, really, really good. Also on the 16th of October, we got from Black and Death Records, Woman 2, the worldwide organization of metalheads against Nazis. It's a 44-track compilation. Got a new track from Ghoul. I found loads of really cool stuff on here that I hadn't heard before. I really, really liked Allfather and Cosmogear, two completely different bands there, but it's a really, really varied compilation. You will find some cool stuff on it, whatever your tastes are. It's Name Your Price on Bandcamp, certainly for first day sales, but maybe for the rest, 90% of sales proceeds go to Médecins Sans Frontières. So no excuses. Go out and get that, support a good cause, and help fight fascism today. We endorse metalheads against Nazis. We are metalheads against Nazis. So that's totally cool, totally rad. Get that. There's actually another one as well. There's 2 of them. One came out in April too. So go and have a listen. All right, should we get into a proper review?
Definitely. What have we got up first? I believe it's your choice.
Should we do Behemoth?
Yeah, you want to do Behemoth? Like, let's kick off with a big name. Yeah, let's do
Behemoth.
That's quite an interesting one, isn't it? The overall reviews have been really, really positive on this one, but I don't know, like, I'm not a long-term Behemoth fan, really. Like, I like bits of Behemoth, but I'm not like a massive mega fan or anything. I'm interested to see what the consensus for the cults, KVLT purist are. I don't know if you really fall into that bracket, but you've got your own favourites. So what do you make of it from what you've experienced so far?
Well, it's not a death metal record, is it? I don't think
No.
that's surprising considering what they did with the Satanist, which I don't really think was really a death metal record either. But it's
They were
quite
definitely going out into the direction they've now ended up in, like on Satanist, weren't they? I think.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's quite interesting that they started out as a black metal band and then became a death metal band, and now they've gone back to being a black metal band again, or maybe a kind of gothic band. This is a kind of a bit of a strange album, and like just kind of like from a technical playing standpoint, there's no palm muting in this. It feels to me like the whole album's kind of been written on acoustic guitars, lots of kind of like, open chords and stuff. And I think that probably has a lot, it actually sounds a lot like that Me and That Man album that he did.
That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah,
Exactly
even down to the kids, like at the beginning of the Behemoth album, you got these kids like not forgiving Christ and stuff, which is pretty cool. But they kind of did almost exactly the same thing on the acoustic album, and I really thought that it's more like, when it's not being just kind of like really kind of bleak gothic satanic kind of noise, it's quite rock and rolly. Like the intro to If Crucifixion Was Not Enough, for example, just sounds like a rock and roll track. So it's kind of it's way, way, way out of the realms of death metal. There's no chugging death metal riffs on this album at all. There are some nice solos.
I think it's almost like that old sound to me. It is kind of bubbling under the surface a bit though. Like you still know that it's them.
You got the blasts.
Yeah. But it's definitely like I don't have any like allegiance to any particular point of Behemoth. So for me, I was able to listen to it just, as a one-off, and I quite liked it. I've not been back to it like many times, to be honest with you, but I listened to it and yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, I don't know what the purists think of it, but it was an interesting album for sure. I definitely found it easier. I found it easier listening to the when I watched the video, because when I heard God Equals Dog, well, I saw the video for God Equals Dog, and I was just like, all right. When I remember saying to you, this is actually a bit silly, and when I can listen to it, away from kind of some of the associations that they have image-wise, which I know shouldn't come into it, but I kind of felt it was getting a little bit daft and a little bit theatrical. So just to listen to the music on its own terms, it definitely comes over in a different context to how I had sort of perceived it originally, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Certainly the visuals are a big part of it. And if you watch earlier Behemoth videos, I mean, it's always been that way.
Yeah.
But like now, with all the choirs and the kind of like synthy kind of satanic stuff going on, it's all
children
way
shouting.
More, yeah, it's all way more atmospheric. And I think the theatrical aspect of it, translates to the music more now than it did when they were kind of just playing like black and death metal.
Like I always used to be put off by them. And this is really, really shallow of me actually, but I guess, I don't know, I saw it and I just thought they were going to be some silly kind of hiding out in the woods bullshit, and I was like, no, can't be asked. And then you played me, what was that song you played me when I came to see you? When we were in Brooklyn?
Conquer All, found on the jukebox, yeah.
Like, yeah, that was it, yeah. And I was like, oh my god, I was like, this is absolutely brutal. And I was like, I kind of forgot about all the stuff with him running around with crows and all that kind of carry on. I was like, actually, I was like, this is really, really, you know what I mean? It's you would definitely, and I did get the wrong idea of Behemoth based on their image, which shouldn't come into it, but I guess you are going to make these judgments, and my mistake that I did, but maybe they have actually since kind of fulfilled that opinion that I did have of them. Now they've kind of fitted into that role. But I've enjoyed listening to the new one, to be honest with you, and I thought it was quite a good album, different, but I've pretty much enjoyed it. Yeah.
I don't know if I really kind of loved the album. I really liked it the first time I listened to it. I then kind of didn't feel a need to go back to it after I listened to it a couple of times. And then I was kind of umming and ahhing about whether I even wanted to kind of devote a lot of time in the pod to it.
Yeah.
But I've listened to it 10 times at least now. I don't love it. There are some bits in it that I really like. ROM 5.8 is much more like a kind of a traditional Behemoth track for me. It's a complete rager. But at the end of the day, I think that this is a really important album by a really important band. And I think that whether you love or hate Nurgle, and Behemoth, I think the metal scene really needs Behemoth, and bands like them that are willing to really kind of, push the boundaries in musically, and really kind of forge their own path. And I think that, I Loved You at Your Darkest is this kind of realization of this really bold artistic vision. In terms of imagery and atmosphere and music, it's another example of why Behemoth are, for me, one of the most important bands in metal.
And I think if they hadn't done, and we said the same about Pig Destroyer as well, I think if they had just released Demigod over and over again for the last sort of 15 years, people would be like you'd have like sort of 3 or 4 really, really influential albums years and years back, and then just like diminishing returns afterwards. So it's kind of like it's what a band's supposed to do after that period of time. I mean, I think that's the only thing that can really keep it interesting is by trying something new and trying something different. And to their credit, from my point of view and my knowledge of Behemoth, I think they've managed to retain their sound whilst doing that. I think if you're expecting the satanic death metal and what you're used to, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you understand that a change is going to happen after 10 albums they've got?
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, something at least.
Yeah, then you probably get something from this. I mean, if you want the old Behemoth, there are plenty of old Behemoth albums that you can go to listen to, which are incredibly acclaimed across the board. So you know where to look. But it's not something I'll probably go back to a lot. But I thought it was a pretty good album, to be honest, man. So there you go. That's my verdict.
Let's have a listen.
Definitely.
So, next up, Brainoil, Singularity to Extinction. This
cool name.
Yeah, it's a really cool looking record actually. It's kind of like got this black kind of mirrored, silvery mirrored cover to it, and it's got this kind of like spectral cosmic oddity, like twisting some kind of weird science. It's fucking cool.
Heavy metal extreme metal seems to be really getting into space at the moment. That really seems to be a big thing, and I guess they're going down that line. But musically, they're not really very space orientated at all. No. But I love. It's a great name and incredibly heavy.
Yes.
You weren't lying when you told me it was very, very heavy.
Yes, it's very heavy. I absolutely just get crushed by this album. It's so brutal, but not like in a kind of like frenzied kind of way, like a lot of the death metal that we listen to. I mean, this is just crushing.
It did surprise me that you recommended it, actually, as your forte is generally like your technical death metal or Dying Fetus and all that kind of thing. And this is much more sedate's the wrong word, because it's definitely not sedate. I guess stripped down and just kind of more. I don't mean this like negatively, but more Neanderthal. But in terms of sort of very basic but very very effective, very very aggressive stamps all over your head.
Yeah, it's like I think one of the things that I like about it is that it doesn't really kind of like get too bogged down in it. Like, it's only 27 minutes long.
I love that.
Yeah,
I was so happy that it was only 27 minutes long. I couldn't have dealt with it any more than that.
But like, yeah, it's so heavy that you just kind of like, a lot of bands that kind of like really go for that completely, especially like the slower end. These bands just kind of go on and on and on and just bludgeon you. But this just like, they're 4-minute songs, and they might be quite slow. It kind of changes pace quite nicely. It has some ups and up-tempo bits, but it's generally quite a slow record. But it just doesn't kind of fuck around that much. It just kind of like just crush, 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 crush. Like really brutal, grunty death metal vocals, but it's definitely a sludge album, right? It's more kind of like a NOLA style of kind of I Hate Goddy kind of sludge rather than death. That
yeah, it kind of reminds me of like, maybe, I don't know if you ever heard of Coffins, or like a Japanese sludge band. And it's kind of in that sort of vein. But actually, it's funny that you're saying like it's overall very slow, because one of the things that stood out for me was the fact that it doesn't just play down-tuned slow riffs for 27 minutes. They're actually, like, what was it, Spectre's Vile Hand. It's got a section that's almost up-tempo. You wouldn't quite call it fast, but it's definitely of a more noticeably speedier tempo than you would normally associate with sludge metal. And also Singularity for Extinction. I was listening to that, and it's like, you could almost, if you're inclined, you could almost have a skank to that. I mean, there's no reason that you would. But you know what I mean, though, and that's definitely not something that you really associate with this kind of style. So I'm not saying that they're like reinventing an entire kind of area of music or anything, but it definitely brought in. If I put it on, I was like, okay, this is heavy, but I've kind of heard this before. And then a few more bits came in, and I was like, actually, this is definitely worth something checking out a bit further, I think.
Yeah.
I saw the vocals. I mean, they never really vary from a guttural death growl. I didn't realise there were two guys actually, but to be honest, that just seems fitting. I just think it really, really fit in very, very well. I really like it. It's got that variety in tempo. It really reinforces the point when they go, well, heavier. They never really drop much beneath monumentally heavy, but that's all you need sometimes, isn't it? It's good. 27 minutes gets the job done and leaves you on the floor. So
yeah, I mean, this is a very Tank Crimes record. It kind of not necessarily sounds like the other bands on the label, which is a punk and metal label. So, but it just kind of feels like that because it's so raw and stripped down and just kind of it's completely unpretentious. I just really think it's a really enjoyable stuff.
Is that kind of what? I've never even heard of Tank Crimes before until you mentioned it to me a couple of weeks ago. So is this kind of the area of music that Tank
well, they
deal with? Or?
They do. So they do metal and punk,
right.
But Necrot are on Tank Crimes, and as are Ghoul. So you've got kind of like the death metal, you've got like the thrashy stuff. So yeah, it kind of really fits nicely in that camp. It's they're a really great label. So I think Brainoil are actually in Japan at the moment. They're playing a few shows over there. They will be doing a big Tank Crimes show in Oakland on February the 2nd. So if we have any West Coast listeners, get yourself to that. Necrot are playing, Ghoul are playing. It's going to be awesome. I'm hoping that they'll come out east at some point, but I don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah. I also want to request that you play the intro riff to Blank Static Void, as that was one thing that really, really stuck out to me. That was a hell of a riff, man. I'm sure you got your preferences, but that's my request. So.
I'm putting it on now.
Excellent. Yeah, so about 3 weeks ago, I went to see YOB at the Garage in Highbury and Islington in London. I'm a bit of a new convert to Doom, actually. It's only really been the last 3 years that I've really started listening to it a bit more. Pretty much starting with Yob and Pallbearer, and I guess Bong Ripper as well to a lesser extent. Obviously, I've always known that Doom existed, but I just kind of thought there's more bands that just basically can't get past the fact that Black Sabbath existed 40 years ago, and I just assumed that it was just bands that sounded like that, which I realised I'm incredibly wrong about. And for me, Yob are a really, really good example of that. I was really surprised at how good they were. I only really know 2014's Clearing the Path to Ascend and this year's Our Raw Heart, which had a bit of a mixed reaction. And to be honest with you, I'm not a particularly big fan of that album. I think it's okay. They opened with the first two tracks off that, A Blaze and The Screen, which did come over a lot better, actually. And I thought, okay, this is cool. It got people's heads nodding, and I was really impressed. But actually, it was when they went back to the old stuff that the gig really, really kicked off. I noticed the band really seemed to get into it as well as the audience, and I sort of realised that's really where their reputation comes from. We're talking material sort of between sort of 2004 and 2009. They played Ball of Molten Lead from The Illusion of Motion and The Live at Sin from The Great Cessation. And it's really kind of surreal quality to the material that I've not really heard from any of their newer stuff at all. And what really, really stood out for me was how good a guitarist Mike Schmidt is. I just never really appreciated how good he was before. And the real high point was they came on for an encore, and by that point I was like, well, I kind of want to go home now. I've kind of, had enough. And they started playing this track, Grasping Air, and it was which is from The Unreal That Never Lived, and the soloing in that was just absolutely amazing. Everybody was just stood there, and a friend's girlfriend said that she basically lost herself in the middle of it, and that's pretty accurate. I was just really, really blown away by how good they were. The interesting thing for me is that, I went along because I'm familiar with the later material, and I was more into the older material that I knew nothing about, and it was far more interesting and frankly better than the later stuff. So it's kind of a shame to have to talk about a band that's doing the current rounds on the basis of their older material, but I enjoyed them much more because they did pull the older material out. So I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I would really, really recommend investigating any of their material, but particularly the earlier stuff, and I think even you would be impressed if you saw them, Matthew. Here is an excerpt from Grasping Air.
Yeah, man, I'd not really gotten that into the Hour of Raw Heart album. I know it's been given, huge plaudits in the metal scene, the doom scene, obviously. But the Screen was this track that kind of like just did my head in a bit.
You don't like that one,
chugging riff. But
I love that.
I can't deal with it, man. But what I will say is that you sent me a Spotify list of the set list, and I guess we should make that public, shouldn't we, on the Spotify account? But it was really good. I agreed, like that. The older material was really cool. I would go and see them live if they come back. Well, I'm sure they will be back here on the East Coast.
On the subject of them coming back, it was just announced today that they are playing the Black Heart in Camden in London for free next Thursday, the 15th of November. So if anyone is in London, and I'm sure that we've got millions of people listening to this in London, by all means head down if you can get in, because that's bound to be an incredible gig. So.
Oh, you heard it here first.
YOB in a small room above a pub.
Outstanding. Good venue, that. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so... what else? So I went to a show. I missed Behemoth and Out the Gates, which is shame on me. I have seen both of those bands several times, and there's just a lot of gigs going on at the moment, and I just couldn't really make it happen. I don't have a ton of updates about stuff that's coming. We'll point out that the Decibel Beer and Metal Fest for Philly has been announced. It's going to be in April. We have half the bands and most of the breweries. The breweries are killer. But we have Baroness, Enslaved, Tomb, Mold, Deceased, Out of Heaven, others. There's going to be more. It looks like a pretty good lineup. And, well, I would be there just for the beer and the metal. The fact that Enslaved up there is a pretty big thing for me because I love that band. The other day I did go and see the Contamination Tour, which is now wrapped up. That was Dying Fetus, Incantation, Gatecreeper, and Genocide Pact. Pretty much what you would expect, just a lot of death metal in the Underground Arts on Callawhill Street in Center City. That is a lovely little venue, really kind of intimate. Genocide Pact kicked off. They're a really solid young band. And a very tight and aggressive set. Sadly, not very many people were there at that point. So
how is this possible?
That's the first band on. I don't know. Like a lot of people didn't go, but like I thought that was a shame. Their album Order of Torment, which basically formed almost the entirety of their set, came back out in February. I think it's kind of fallen off of a few people's like album of the year lists. But just because it's been out for such a while, so it's not fresh in the memory. It's really good. If people like old school death metal, just go and listen to that. It's quality. I really like that album. And go and see them if they come around. They were followed by Gatecreeper, just so like menacing, just crushing heaviness. I really, really enjoyed their set. It was predominantly I think they have two albums. So that it was the vast majority of the set was off of the Sonora and Deprivation album, which came out in 2016. But they finished with one of the tracks off of their recent split with Iron Reagan. Just excellent, really, really heavy band. I really enjoyed their set. Very atmospheric. And then another band, shame on me, that I'm not particularly familiar with, despite their legendary status, Incantation. Classic old school death metal with really kind of like a lot of technical flair, tremendous musicianship. The guitarist was playing one of those Halo guitars that my guitar teacher uses. He was just shredding that thing, man. Total, just all over the place, and just very, very heavy on the pinched harmonics and the tremolo dives.
Sounds like you're in heaven, man.
Pretty much.
Like, this is my new favourite band. Pinched harmonics and tremolo.
Yeah, they were really good. I can't do them justice as I'm not really that familiar with their back catalogue, but I'm going to make sure that I change that because they.
From what I understand from various friends who are into death metal, they're actually definitely quite a big deal. So I'm surprised you're not into them. Actually, I'm surprised that they've dropped off your radar. But I suspect you will like them from what I gather.
Oh yeah, I've read so many people say Incantation is my favorite death metal band and everything, and it's just terrible failure on my part. But definitely we will go back and be listening to their albums. Really good. And then just finished with Dying Fetus. I think it's like the third or fourth time I've seen them. They're just undefeatable.
Yeah.
They're so brutal that they have that kind of like really like chuggy hardcore very very kind of hardcorey breakdowns. They sound like a punk band, a hardcore band to me. But then they go and do these like. Well, John Gallagher is like one of the most underrated guitarists around. I think he just goes off on one with these insane little licks, and then just goes into some other pummeling little, pummeling riff. That was a set that was very heavy on the newer stuff. I think like more than half of it, like 6 tracks maybe, were off of the 2017 album Wrong One to Fuck With. And then a smattering of others, a couple of tracks off of Reign Supreme, which is my favorite Dying Fetus album. It had Subjected to a Beating and From Womb to Waste, which is just incredible. So yeah, like I don't know. I mean, Dying Fetus, like what can you say? They're just the kind of quintessential fuck you in your face brutal death metal band, and you just like.
Would it be?
Can't be beat.
Would it be safe to say they're the quintessential Punishing Brutality band?
Well, I think Piggy have that title, but
yeah, they probably do, don't they? There's a few, I think.
Yeah. All right. You went to another gig recently, didn't you?
Yeah, Friday I went to see the legendary Will Haven, which, like. I don't know if you know anything about them. I don't know if many people know anything about them. I know in America, from what I gather, they weren't really much of a big deal. But here in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were. But the funny thing is, they basically ended up touring with bands like Fear Factory and loads of kind of nu metal bands of the time. I remember when they came out, the description said that they sounded like Korn crossed with Neurosis. And they were known for being friends with Deftones and who brought them on their first tours. Yeah.
Bit of a Deftonesy influence, I thought.
A little, yeah. You can tell that they're like. I mean, they are good friends, like, and you can hear that. But apparently, like Stephen Carpenter from Deftones has said that if anything, elements of their sound are influenced by Will Haven, but it's there to a point. But I mean, Will Haven are a much more aggressive, much darker prospect than Deftones by a considerable way. There's none of the crooning in there. There's none of the nice atmospherics. They're just a very, very bleak experience. But it's funny because, when they were around the first time out, they were thrown in with a lot of that kind of nu metal stuff. But they're more of a hardcore sort of noise metal band than anything else. They've said that their influences they basically started as a Fudge Tunnel covers band. And I noticed lately they supported Converge and Aim and Ra, which is a much better fit for them than late 90s nu metal. Well, it is. It's the funny thing. But back then, no one really knew what to do with them. And they were kind of 20 years ahead of their time. They did enjoy a bit of a career over here. But, they flitted in and out of existence and what have you. But anyway, they finally came back over for a tour. And I was not really knowing because they're getting on a bit and what have you, and I wasn't too fussed about the latest album. And they played it safe. They played like a good amount of the early material. So you've got stuff like material like, they had a trio of albums such as El Diablo, Carpe Diem, and WHVM that they did back in the early 2000s. And it was heavily based on that, and it was just absolutely devastating. The sound wasn't so great at first, but I kind of moved around a bit and checked them out from a couple of different places. The sound was a lot better, and they were really, really good. They threw in a Pink Floyd cover, which worked surprisingly well. They also did a Faith No More cover of Jizz Lobber, which didn't work quite so well. They threw in tracks like Saga, I've Seen My Fate, Fresno, and Stick Up Kid. A couple from the new album, such as Winds of Change, which is not the Scorpions song. They didn't play anything from my favourite album of theirs, Voir d'Hier, but overall they were really, really good. There was a bit of a lacking crowd for them because Slayer were playing in town, actually, on the same night, but even so, it didn't matter. They might be in their mid to late 40s, but they may as well have been in their early 20s. They were going absolutely crazy, and I just watched them and I thought, well, you might be pushing 40, but you have no excuse. If Will Haven could do it at 46, 47, then anyone can do it. So they were, I give that a really, really high rating. I'd probably give it like an 8 or 9 out of 10, I think. No, 8 out of 10 I give them, I think.
Excellent. Should we have a listen?
Yeah, here's a clip off Lives Left to Wither. Oh, there you go, that's a cheery sounding song, isn't it? There's a clip from Lives Left to Wither off 2011's Voir d'Hier.
I do not know who I am, yet I am desperately wanting self-definition. I am trying to get us to abandon that terminology. I am saying something inconsistent. I am a non-immigrant. I am who I say I am. I am an employer. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am speaking to a microphone, broadcasting my despair, but I hear no response. I am sorry I was not here to hear your whole testimony. I am listening now.
Okay, that was Will Haven. We're going to move into a different section now. We're going to have a little look at some kind of underground. I guess all metal is underground to a certain extent, but these bands are UK bands that we think that guys in the US at least would not have heard of, and we want to give them a shout out and a fist bump, and we want to use our position as
acclaimed journalists,
exactly, all conquering international podcasters to elevate their standing. So should we talk about Casket Feeder?
Let's talk about Casket Feeder. So they were founded in 2016. They're from Milton Keynes. I saw them, as I seem to always see bands, at the Unicorn by accident, which is a very common theme, going to the Unicorn and finding bands by accident. Great pub based in Camden. When I saw them, they came across as very 90s metal, which for me is great. Lots of cool breakdowns, very, very intense, very full on. I actually told the guitarist afterwards that I couldn't deal with the amount of metal on display. It was just ridiculous. He was incredibly apologetic.
I bet.
He's like, yeah, sorry about that, mate. I was like, no, you're fine. I've listened back. There's some definite death metal influences in it. The track Ill Will reminds me a little bit of something off The Bleeding by Cannibal Corpse. And they've described themselves as blending the chainsaw fury of Swedish death metal with UK hardcore sledgehammer groove, and a punishing trifecta of brutality, rage, and power. They have 2 EPs, 2016's Venomous Tongues and this year's Scalps, out on Hibernacular Records. Check them out on Facebook and Instagram and what have you. Yeah, I was just really, really impressed with this. Have you had a chance to listen to it yet, Matt? Or?
I listened to Scalps, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Yeah, like it was. To start with, I thought, this is going to be kind of like pretty straight up like power violence. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned Nails. They sound quite a bit like Nails to me.
Definitely in there a bit, yeah.
And I thought it was going to be pretty much kind of straight down the middle, but then it wasn't. And it started going into
riffs in there, man. They've got some
massive riffs.
Yeah.
And also, I forget the name of the track. Is it Hammering Nails into the Tree of Woe or something?
Yeah,
Hanging Tree.
Carve the names upon the hanging tree. That's right. We're going to play an excerpt from that in a minute.
Oh man, that track's fucking brilliant. Like it's really like surprisingly mournful. You know, like it has that really kind of like melancholy, like minor key. Reminded me of Wormrock.
Yeah.
Like it was. It's really good.
There's like a midsection that goes on for quite a while. It's more sort of atmospheric and dissonant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like launches into this riff. But I was watching them and I kind of started off with the grimace, and then the grimace just kept getting on my face, just kept getting more and more throughout the set. And by the time I got to the end of the set, it was just like I just couldn't deal with it. It was just really, really good. So here it is, Carve the Names upon the Hanging Tree. What have you got?
I have
Psalms
to the Synthetic Divine, So that's by Where Deprivation Lies. They are from Blackpool. And unsurprisingly for me to be talking about them, they are raging tech death.
Oh, really?
Yep, tech death. But this is really just kind of like no messing about. There's no kind of like contemplative synths or clean singing and like proggy musing. It's just like slamming double bass, just riffs, just fast, energetic, in your face, but like, you know, still with that kind of very polished production and you know, extremely high levels of musicality that you expect from this genre. I became aware of these guys recently because they were plugged by Matt Moss from Sludge. Because I think these guys used to be in a band with Kev Pearson, who plays guitars in Sludge, and he's my hero. So I was, you know, obviously very keen to immediately check these guys out. They're really good. Only got the one little EP, just 3 tracks at the moment. Like I said, Psalms to the Synthetic Divine. It came out in 9/21. That's the 21st of September if you are in the UK. And it's really good. Get it on Bandcamp. Go and check it out. This is Nuclear Hymn.
Cool. Okay, so my second, and I believe this is the final of the UK Underground, was going to be a slightly longer feature, but something came up which we'll discuss in a minute. But before we do, DAO, that's DAO. They're a Leeds-based band featuring ex-members of Canvas, Richard Parker, and Human Fly. Human Fly, when I lived in Leeds, were always a band that played around. I don't want to go on about Human Fly too much because it's about DAO, but they're an excellent band and everybody should check them out. And likewise, check these guys out as well. They're kind of in the vein of Gaza, Cult Leader, Coalesce, and kind of that sort of corrosive, brutal hardcore sound. The track that they've got up has a sort of a swinging doom kind of sound in places too. It's kind of in the more technical hardcore vein than anything else. It reminds me of the sort of Hydra Head Records 2000 era stuff. Bands like Canute, Keelhaul, that kind of thing. They've recorded a number of songs with Tom Dring, who's recorded for Venom Prison and Dragged into Sunlight, and they're apparently recording a few more soon for a debut album in May. For now, there is Father available to download for free on their Bandcamp, so you have absolutely no excuse, so go and investigate DAO. That's DAO, in case you can't understand my accent. It's an easy one to remember, so off you go find it. They've also got a show upcoming on November the 9th at the Key Club in Leeds, UK, so you can even see them live if you are so inclined. So there you go.
Come on, Leeds.
We're going to play the whole thing as the song's not very long and it's awesome, so here you go. Here's Father. Basically had to change, well, we didn't have to, but we did change the format of this show. We were going to extend some of the other parts, do an extended feature on UK bands, but
we will.
We're definitely bringing that back in, yeah. But I mean, you know, no one wants to be the guys who go on about all the old bands from, you know, the olden days and blah blah blah. And with that in mind, you know, this album turned 25, and we just had to feature it. I mean, we've discussed this, and we always have to try to have an excuse to feature an album, be that we think it's underappreciated, or when we've asked each other to review albums, it's kind of a way of us getting albums that we really love into it. But, you know, generally there has to be a reason. You know, we've discussed about putting Wormrot and Nails in there, which are bands that have recently released albums that we love, but we just don't have any real reason to get them into the show. So with that in mind, you can't have a podcast called Punishing Brutality and not feature Sepultura. There's obviously no real reason for us to feature Sepultura. However, Chaos AD turned 25 on October the 19th. So with that in mind, we were like, okay, let's rearrange everything, and we are going to discuss Chaos AD, one of the greatest metal albums of all time. So in the 90s, it was pretty much Sepultura and Pantera who ruled the roost, influencing countless bands that you can see in modern acts today. Both bands like Gojira and Nails have cited Chaos AD as a massive influence. Being the nerd I am, I saw that Todd Jones of Nails has said the main riff to Unsilent Death is basically Territory over and over again. It's like his homage to them. Full of Hell even have a shirt modelled on Sepultura's Beneath the Remains shirt. So it's like their influence is basically undeniable. In spite of the move away from their previous death metal thrash roots, which was sort of first solidified on Beneath the Remains and perfected on Arise, this album is still recognisably them. Matt, what did you think of this change in sound? I remember, it was my first exposure to Sepultura at the time. It was, they'd been a death thrash band before. This kind of really, really slowed it down, but to me was just as heavy. What do you think about that?
Well, this was the first Sepultura album that I really listened to.
Yeah.
Going back and listening to Arise for me was like kind of more illuminating in a change than this was when it was released. Obviously, what came after this with Roots was another radical, even more significant radical departure.
Yeah.
But like this is this is not a death metal album. I know I already said that about another record today. I don't see this as a death metal album. It's more just a kind of like power thrash heaviness. I don't know what you would call it, but
it's like one of the it's kind of like that kind of like quintessential 90s metal sound, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of like
the essential 90s metal album. It's it's not thrash. It's not quite death. It certainly isn't nu metal because that luckily hadn't quite broken at that point.
Yeah,
it was kind of its own thing, but was no less sort of effective for it, I think.
And to Sepultura's everlasting credit, they're not like a kind of like genre pigeonhole band. No. They're Sepultura. They sound like Sepultura, and that's them. It's just an absolutely classic record, departure from Arise, which is really, 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 really good.
Yeah. It was more contemporary, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of had like elements of hardcore and punk influences.
Very.
It does sound slightly dated now, but it's got a number of like metal sort of staples. And you got your Refuse Resist, Territory, Biotech is Godzilla. My personal highlight's Propaganda. It's just like I just remember at the time instantly everybody was trying to work out how to play Refuse Resist on guitar, or everyone was trying to work out how to play the intro to that track. It just had a real massive impact at the time.
Right, and it's so accessible, isn't it? Like even though it's like really, really heavy, it's just got really catchy riffs and intelligible lyrics, so you can kind of pump your fist and sing along and everything. And it is just it's just a big crowd pleaser of an album, but like not in a kind of cheesy way. Just like it's just really enjoyable, and with all the kids like trying to learn how to play that stuff, it's kind of quite interesting because like you totally could, because the riffs are very, I don't want to say simple, but they are quite simple, but like it's still played really well, and it has like really interesting musical nuance about it, even though it is like kind of on the face of it seems quite straightforward, but like there's subtle time signature changes in there, like and the rhythm section. Like, shall we talk about the drumming? I know we like talking about drumming.
Yeah, well, but before we do, I was going to come to that in a second, but just go back to what you were saying about nuances. The thing I've always liked about Sepultura is how well they work in it and don't step on each other's toes. I saw a video of Andreas and Max running through various riffs, and as you're saying about the simple stuff is Max's more stuff. Andreas's is more technical. but it's kind of, there is like a real kind of progressive edge, like Andreas Kisser.
Yeah.
And you just have to look at what they've done since to realize how well they sort of fit together. And Andreas Kisser, if you listen to some of the instrumental passages in tracks such as Nomad or Propaganda or We Who Are Not As Others, it's really not conventional metal at all. And I think that's what really, really made them stand out at the time. It's got a real kind of atmosphere to it that just wasn't existing and at the time, and yeah, worked very, very well. And, of course, back to what you're wanting to talk about, let's talk about Igor Cavalera, the drummer. You can't talk about Sepultura and not mention Igor Cavalera. So what do you think of Igor Cavalera?
Well, he's the man, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, this record, and I'll let you go off on this because you know far more about drumming than I do. But like the Latin rhythms, or the way that it's incorporated into what is a pretty it's very much a kind of extreme metal album, and like you say, maybe not quite so extreme now to to modern ears, but like to have that Latin flair in there is just so completely revolutionary and such a distinctive sound, and it's all Igor, and the stuff that he's doing is just like, I don't know if it just kind of comes naturally to him, or if they made a kind of really conscious decision to kind of say, we are going to play metal with a Latin flavor.
I think it was a bit of both, because he said, I read an interview with him, and he said that originally he wanted to be a thrash and a death drummer, and he is amazing at that. And even on that stuff, you can still hear that it's different. But he grew up, as he would have done, learning kind of Latin rhythms, and when it got to sort of Chaos AD era and more in particular Roots, but Chaos AD is when the sort of the tribal aspect of Sepultura came in, and some of those kind of rhythms started to come through. So although his playing was still unmistakably metal, it again gave it, as well as the progressive elements that Andreas Kisser brought in and all the different passages, and it just gave it a different sort of off-kilter feel that, again, no other metal band was doing at that point. And it just definitely gave it a different edge that you just wouldn't have had. So I think it was a real good mix of that strange, weird Latino off-kilter thing, but he still had those thrash elements and the double bass rhythms, and it mixed it to great effect. So anyway, I mean, like Chaos AD, they still had a really, really excellent sort of 3 to 4 album run. I'd still slightly prefer a Rise to Chaos AD, but you can't really deny it as an album. So we just had to feature it, really, didn't we? We had to have a reason. So until the reunion, which is never ever going to happen, I don't think, this will have to do. So here's Propaganda.
Why take my word? you think you have the right to put me down? Propaganda, hide your scum. Nice to in a